Welcome to Brainstorming. I'm Anna Tizard, award-winning dreampunk and deeply weird fantasy author, and yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. Explore and imagine with me the most unexpected story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. Find out more and join in at annatizard.com. This is a storytelling challenge unlike anything you've tried before. Hello, imaginative people. I'm Anna Tizard, and this is episode 104 of Brainstorming. Today, I want to talk a bit about the bumps and downturns in a writer's life, and how if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed or you've had to take a bit of a break, there are ways you can really perk yourself up and pick up the momentum once more. My recent experience is I've been going through some health issues, the details of which I won't bore you with, but I've not been feeling that well, and to top it all, the medication that they gave me to try and combat some of the longer term issues has been making me feel unwell too, so you end up feeling stuck in this loop going around in circles, although I think I may have managed to resolve that now. It's complicated. I've also had to make some adjustments to my diet, which naturally means my meals are more boring. And with all of this, going around in circles with medications and not feeling great, by the end of it, let's just say I was suffering from a severe lack of enthusiasm. But, we all have lives, we're all mortal, we're all fallible, and that can make you feel more determined than ever to get better, as much as you can, to keep going and keep writing and publishing and ploughing towards your ultimate goals. This is part and parcel of anyone's life. We all have bumps in the road, swerves in the road, and places that feel like cul-de-sacs where you feel like you're going around in circles, and that's just going to happen. Sometimes we need to rest and step back. And when we're feeling in a better space, just to try something short and juicy to get back into the groove. As it happens, over the Easter break, I was in the middle of an official break from my work in progress, Weird Creatures. So I already knew I needed to take some time out from my draft before I could return to it with fresh eyes for a full-on edit. But even so, I still wanted to do a bit more with those few weeks, especially the time I had off work, which I'd extended to about a week and a half. Having a break is, from writing that is more than just about resting. I want to be somewhere different, to really hit the refresh button on my brain and my body. And if I can't physically go somewhere different, as I often don't have the opportunity, I definitely need my brain to go and visit somewhere else through my imagination. This is partly achieved through reading, but I can't help myself. I also really want to explore somewhere else through writing. Now, in the last show, if you've been listening, you might remember that one of the publishing call-outs was from an imprint called Zombie Needs Brains, which is more than sufficiently crazy for me. And they are looking for slightly longer stories around the 6,000 word mark on were-creatures as alternatives to werewolves. And I just thought, I've got to have a piece of that action. I cannot let that pass. I found myself dabbling with a story idea for that. In fact, the setting was inspired by an Exquisite Corpse on a previous show some time ago, which was the brooding zombie indelicately invoked the hot butter spreader, which got me thinking about a character who works in a sandwich shop and kind of hates it. You can find the original scene I drafted in episode 94. But this new publishing call-out on were creatures took my ideas in a whole new direction, which is good because the publishers don't accept reprints. But one day during my break, I got frustrated with myself, just dabbling. I'd worked out the characters, I drafted a couple of scenes, but not one of them all the way to the end. So when I was feeling just about well enough, I plonked myself down in my chair and went for it. I had breaks, probably every half an hour to 40 minutes. That's kind of the length of time that my concentration sort of keeps going for before I start to collapse. But then each time I came back and just kept pushing, kept ploughing on. As a longer story, I couldn't do it in one day. And I ended up writing this in, I think it was maybe 3 days in the end. Just get the thing down, I told myself. So that is what I did. And that's the perk, the uplift that I'm talking about. Finishing stuff gives you a special boost. It really does. And I probably needed that before I could plunge back into my novel. There's so much advice out there about not getting distracted by other projects, to just keep soldiering on with your one project, especially if it's a novel, because the sheer amount of work that involves. But I say no. With a novel, it's even more important to recognise when you've reached a natural break, like coming to the end of a draft when you need to take time out. There is a long-term frustration that you have to deal with when you're writing a novel. Trust me. But you definitely don't want to get to the point where you rush the end part of the story just so you can get that satisfaction of finishing it. The end part can be the trickiest section to write, so you don't want to fall into that trap and potentially rush it and not make it the very best it can be. You can refresh your energy, not just through actual rest, which is very important, but through spending a little bit of time on another much shorter project that you can finish quickly and relatively easily. Get down that first draft and you'll have a little injection of that finishing energy, that satisfaction of tying something off. Diarise to come back to it after a rest while you're working on something else, perhaps your main work in progress that you return to. Then when you come to edit this short piece and polish it, you will get your full whack of finishing satisfaction. So whether you're writing a novel or have a short story on the go that's got a bit stuck, the joy of short story writing, or writing another short story, maybe a shorter one, is there for all of us to just reach out and grasp. And yes, I truly believe you can, and arguably should, switch between projects. Although, of course, these switches should be less frequent if you have a hefty project on the go, like a novel. If you need your finishing fix, short pieces are where to find that. As for my were-creatures story, it's quite possible that what I've written may be too bonkers for them, although to be fair, from their name, which makes me laugh just thinking about it, and the details in the submission guidelines, they gave examples like were squirrels or were octopuses, and they did say they were open to humour. So we'll see. I can't tell you where I have taken this story because the story itself is kind of like a guessing game. Like, is this character the were-creature? Or is it this other character over here? And the final reveal, which I'm sure would surprise anyone, it certainly surprised me, is hopefully a surprise worth waiting for. But naturally, it is pretty bonkers. I just couldn't help myself, and I had a lot of fun writing it. The thing is, you never know for sure if what you've written is going to be a good fit for a publisher. We're all in that boat. I don't know what other stories they might receive by their deadline of 31st of May. I might not be the only person who's written something that is really out there. But if it doesn't get accepted, I will still have that story, which I could potentially submit elsewhere if I come across something else in the future that looks like it might be a good fit. Either way, I've had loads of fun exploring an idea I never would have developed had it not been for this particular call out cropping up. And I've got my finishing fix. Thank you very much. Speaking of satisfying short fiction, I have some fantastic story and poetry entries today from some brand new contributors to the show, as well as returning writers. Rick Danforth, welcome to the show, Rick, responded to a prompt in the last show, The Confused Imp, with the following flash piece. Malvik the imp looked down at himself for the 10th time that day and wondered how the hell he got there. He was familiar with many, many forms of bondage. Over the years, he had been summoned and bound with chains, runes, and on one notable occasion, a circle of the caster's own intestines. But an itchy suit and a polyester tie was a new one. A confusing one too, not least due to fitting his misshapen wings into such a creation. The desk was even worse. A simple wooden thing full of paperwork to fill out. One in a sea of similar desks, manned by similarly confused and uncomfortable imps. They all clutched delicate fountain pens in claws better designed for rendering through flesh and bone. While Malvik vaguely understood what Beelzebub had told them, that hell needed to work more efficiently to deal with a vastly expanding human population, he couldn't understand why so many had to do this dull, tedious work. The ones suffering seemed to be the demons, not the humans. This is clever. I love how this flips right on its head the perceived normality of office work to humans. How a slice of our ordinary life, from the perspective of another species, an imp, may be hell itself. Thank you for sharing your story, Rick. You can find Rick's work at rickdanforth.com. Paul Benfield also responded to this prompt of The Confused Imp with the following story. The imp skittered across serried ranks of bookcases in the dusty library. The sunlit air was thick with motes drifting on gentle draughts of air coming through sash windows that didn't fully close. Shadows curled around the room, not following the beams of light, but rather splintering at odd angles. This was the legacy of the imp's master and his decades of trading slivers of his soul for powerful magics and longer life. But the master had vanished with no warning, and no sign of violence or magic gone awry. The imp was left with an aching emptiness, alone in the increasingly neglected townhouse. Therein lay the source of the imp's torment, a confusion that tugged its soul and occupied its thoughts day and night. What had become of its contract? That infernal scroll was nowhere to be found, and without it, the imp was bound to this space indefinitely, doomed to arrange books and to fetch them at the bidding of a missing warlock. It must either find the master or the scroll and earn its freedom. Perhaps one more search might offer a new clue? Well, another story, a very different kind of story about this theme of imprisonment. It seems a confused imp is a hapless imp, an imprisoned imp. I love the setting in this one and how it seems to define and invoke this doleful feeling of this poor trapped creature. Thank you, Paul Benfield. HL responded to an Exquisite Corpse that came up in episode 102, which was the pot-bellied volunteer zookeeper danced around with the intent doppelganger. A strange and complicated sounding prompt, but HL wrote. The door reading employees only creaked as the hunched figure with a low pulled hat entered the primate house at the zoo. The man with the long coat shuffled to the cage with a fresh plum in one hand. The orangutan made his way to the edge of confinement to grab it. The shadowy figure quickly pressed a pink-white crystal into his hand. The orangutan's hand burned, but he could not let it go. He scampered into the corner and stared at it. The shadowy man slumped a little lower than before and shuffled out. Carl, the pot-bellied volunteer zookeeper, jaunted into the primate house for feeding time. The orangutan saw him. The primate's eyes widened. Carl, dancing to a tune in his head, made a John Travolta-worthy disco move and spun in front of the cage. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the orangutan do the same thing. Amazed, Carl played mirror with him. He raised a hand, then so did the orangutan. As they got closer, Carl was near the bars. Faster than shattering glass, the orangutan pressed the crystal into Carl's hand and stared into his eyes. Carl opened his mouth to scream, but nothing came. Both their eyes shut. The orangutan opened his and he backed away from the bars. He looked at the crystal in his hand. His human hand! Carl jumped at the bars and found he could not speak. He watched his doppelganger slump and shuffle out the door. And that is indeed how the pot-bellied volunteer zookeeper danced around with the intent doppelganger. What a great idea, swapping identities and bodies. And there's a nice build-up of suspense there where you wonder what's going to happen, and then bam. Thank you for sharing your story, HL, and welcome to the show. I also had a couple of responses to another prompt in the last show, 103, which was the rather curious thickly forested princess. Elena Dennison wrote, Lullaby of the thickly forested princess. Wrapped in emerald ivy's fold, brushed with honeysuckle gold, the thickly forested princess glides by moonlighted woody paths. In her crown small birds sleep, nestled in their thickets deep. Water serpents, pale and thin, glide where ancient tales begin. Hush now, darling, hush and rest. Lay your head on earth's warm breast. Where the fae dance soft and slow, follow where the north winds blow. Close your eyes, my wanderer fair. Moonlit moss will braid your hair. Green men watching from the shade bow their heads to sleeping maids. Sockets black as locks at dusk bury deeds in roots and musk. Melting ice from mountains high, waterfalls ramble and die, where the spellbound river sighs and the stillborn softly cry. Hush now, darling, hush and rest. Lay your head on earth's warm breast. Where the fae dance soft and slow, follow where the north winds blow. Close your eyes, my wanderer fair. Moonlit moss will braid your hair. But the thickly forested princess weaves her lullaby at night for all those sleeping maids who could not put up a fight. Fairy stories feed you lies, pull the wool over your eyes. No more ivy, no more birds, nesting in my flipping hair. Wake up, darlings, raise and fight. Own your bodies, own your rights. Wake now, no beauty sleep, where patriarchal cold winds creep. Eyes wide open, don't be scared. You can braid your own fair hair. This has all the pitch darkness of fairy tale cruelty tightly wound into its rhythms. There's something so magical about this poem, and then this kind of underlying message that comes out at the end. Thank you, Elena. You can find Elena Denison's poetry, musings and artwork on her Linktree at linktr.ee/Lola the Cat. Paul Monteith responded to the full Exquisite Corpse that included the thickly forested princess, which was, somewhat bizarrely, the romantic jelly mould swindled the thickly forested princess. He wrote, "Fire sprites on jelly and cold consequences. Whispering Hollow and the world beyond the dell were under a thickening blanket of snow. You tricked me, Witchwood, said a woman in a gown of shrub and verge. No, Princess Thicket, I said I would rid Whispering Hollow of sprites for a smidgen of sunshine, she replied, and I did. Witchwood held up a jelly mould. See, the sprites, attracted to the sweet sugar plum gelatin, are stuck on its sticky surface like flies on flypaper. You knew a smidgen of sunlight was all it would take to bring about snowfall. As agreed, I took no more than a flicker of starlight as payment to end Hollow's sprite infestation." Witchwood admired her boughs heavy with globes of fruit. "The cold benefits me. Look at all these bright red rowan berries." Turning away, Princess Thicket draped her boughs with burlap against the cold, and root over root made her way through Whispering Hollow's chilly disenchantment. Iced tears prevented the willows from weeping. Hungry squirrels had no acorns to store because the oaks had failed to fruit in the cold. Much of the woodland showed signs of dieback, split bark, and blackening leaves. In a frost-blue sky hung the pale sun, and grey clouds peppered hoarfrost over Princess Thicket and her kingdom. "Shall you not warm us again?" the princess asked the sun. "Free the fire sprites from the jellies, Princess Thicket," the sun replied, "and the sprites will add their fire to mine, restoring sunlight and warmth." Gosh, this is like a whole fairy tale condensed into a flash fiction tale. I don't quite know how you managed to do that. Full of natural forces clashing with each other. Thank you for your inventive story, Paul. You can find Paul Monteith on his Linktree at linktr.ee/mostlypaul. Right, it is time to stir the bottomless cauldron of our imaginations once more with the big spoon that is Brainstorium. Let us reach fearlessly into the socks of destiny. That's right, Exquisite Corpse mixes your words and phrases into a sentence that goes describing word noun, action, describing word noun. I'll play 3 rounds to create 3 very weird sentences, exploring story possibilities along the way. Then there will be a second round of brainstorms where I take things deeper by rolling the 12-sided dice. So, as ever, it is with a little trepidation and curiosity always that I reach into the describing word sock. Our first word is from Paul Thomas. Shocked. Who or what was shocked? Our noun is from, if I can just extract it from my finger, Sean, also known as Blue Wizard Facts. Zombie. Oh, what could shock a zombie? Are they capable of being shocked? This is very strange. Are they a true zombie if they can be shocked? Let's find an action. This is from Alessandro Bozzo. Danced through the forest with. We have dancing zombies in our midst. Okay, next word is from Oh, this is Paul Monteith. Indifferent. That's interesting because I would have thought a zombie is indifferent since they cannot feel anymore. What's going on here? Final word is from Paul Thomas again. Blister. Blister. Okay, this is extraordinarily odd. The shocked zombie danced through the forest with the indifferent blister. If you give a zombie an electric shock, then maybe they'll sort of dance? Very macabre. What kind of Halloween party is this? Held in the woods? Who's been to Zombies R Us? An indifferent blister? Maybe indifferent in that it doesn't hurt or it just won't go down. This is actually making me think of disease in general, or a perception of disease that harks back to, a few hundred years ago, maybe 500 years ago or so, earlier, when science and medicine were less prominent and well developed, and people were more frightened about illness because so much was unknown and superstition was rife. So I'm thinking a shocked zombie dancing through the forest with an indifferent blister it's almost like an outlandish, elaborate way of describing someone with a disease when you have no clue what you are talking about, and your language and way of thinking is completely infused with fantasy because you have insufficient modern day science at your fingertips. So I have this very strange image of someone afflicted by blisters, and they're told by the village so-called doctor to dance naked under the moonlight through the forest. And people might call them a zombie because if you've got someone who has extremely low energy, in some kind of stupor, they don't know what's wrong with him, then they might say he's like a shocked zombie. I mean, this is... I'm really trying here. I'm not really seeing much of a story possibility here, except it feels kind of like a setting or a psychological setting, if you know what I mean, steeped in unspoken terror and superstition. People gathered around a bedside, worried what is wrong with someone when they're exhausted and have only one other symptom, an indifferent blister. A blister that just won't go away. Might their beloved already be a zombie? Can they shock this zombie into being awakened from the dead? I dread to think what it would be like in those days if people actually thought that you were in fact a monster or kind of undead, when in fact you're just horribly ill and for whatever reason cannot speak or express yourself. So, is this horror, possibly moving into comedy? I'm not sure. It's a very weird situation, but I guess all you have to do is go back in history to find some extremely weird ways of thinking and psychological settings, as I said. Let's move swiftly on to something new. Our new word is from Paul Monteith, blood-curdling. Okay, so we're in for some more horror, I think. Let's see, I'm reaching right down into the sock. Okay, one from Wendy. Detective. A blood-curdling detective. That does not bode well. Right. Let's get an action. Who's this from? Sean, Blue Wizard Facts. Threatened. Well, yeah, it does kind of feel like that. Next word is from Alessandro Bozzo. Condescending. Okay. I guess that's a reason to threaten someone if they're condescending to you. Final word is from Paul Thomas. Sombrero. We have a condescending hat in our midst. Okay, I'm gonna pour the green tea because I think I need a little bit of time to process this. So let's give this a stir. Here we go. Right. So altogether we have the blood-curdling detective threatened, the condescending sombrero. What's blood-curdling about this detective? Please, can we say that this is a person wearing a sombrero rather than a speaking hat? But why would they be condescending to this detective? Maybe they don't realise how dangerous this detective is. This has to be a fake detective, surely. The guy in the sombrero, maybe he sells hats. He has a hat shop and hats have been disappearing from his shop with no explanation. There's no sign of any breaking and entering. Something's not right. He finds an ad for a detective agency, but they charge too much, so he goes for the ad below it. No job too strange. I'm thinking Dr. Unlikely. That's probably not a good title, but is maybe because I'm starting to think, is this some sort of prank or a joke? Someone claims a PhD in criminology. Very nice. Why so cheap then? Is he for real? Perhaps he is a she. She comes to visit the shop. Something in her quick, unblinking stare unnerves him. And she asks him, "Are you familiar with the supernatural, sir?" This could be why the guy in the sombrero is condescending towards her, because he's utterly unbelieving. But what if the hat shop is in fact built on top of an ancient grave? What if the blood-curdling detective is in fact a ghoul or a vampire? What if the whole thing is a prank, a setup, but then it goes wrong? So she's going to lead him to believe, because, well, perhaps he's gullible as well as condescending, that there's some kind of witchcraft involved, or that he needs witchcraft to solve this problem. When in fact, this has all been set up by his daughter, who encouraged him to employ this detective and investigate, and she's actually been hiding the hats. But when they begin some kind of witchcraft ceremony, things go awry. Ghosts start to appear. This is very, very weird. Well, I kind of like the specificity of a hat shop and all of that. It's just somehow brings it to life in my mind. Anyway, let's try for a third and final exquisite corpse before we go deeper. First word is from Sean, also known as Blue Wizard Facts. Otherworldly. Okay. Who or what was otherworldly? This is from Paul Thomas. Raccoon. No. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's keep going, see what happens. You're keeping me entertained, people. So, the action is, again, Sean from Blue Wizard Facts was obsessed with. Okay, let's just keep going. Just don't ask what is happening. Right, this is from Anonymous. Always happy to hear from Anonymous as well as everybody else. Quibbling. So someone sort of arguing about things that are a bit menial. Final word. Oh my goodness. Oh, I have to disentangle these things. Here we go. This is from Bargy. Ooh. Chamuça. So I had to look this up. Portuguese and or Mozambican version of a samosa. Right? Oh no. So we have a completely ridiculous one. Can we do anything with it? This is the ultimate challenge for our imaginations as writers. If we can make something of this, then we've really achieved something. Yeah? Keeping that imagination limber. So we have the otherworldly raccoon was obsessed with the quibbling chamuça. Okay, let's break it down. So a raccoon has a sort of a mask like a bandit, the way its facial colouring is. Makes me think, your sandwich or your life, because they have incredible appetites. I'm well aware of the love-hate relationship that is had across the pond with these funny little creatures with their little hands, their little fingers that can prise open rubbish bins, or I should say trash cans. So we are talking about food. Was obsessed with the quibbling chamuça. How far will a raccoon go to get its little fingers on a spicy chamuça? But a quibbling chamuça, quibbling is kind of like a petty objection. This feels like a possible theft theme again. But otherworldly raccoon, all I can think is someone in a raccoon suit dressed up to disguise the fact that they're an alien. Imagine a party where everyone's dressed up. You're a bit unsure of who's who. Maybe there are two people in raccoon suits. Raccoons are popular this year. So is there some quibbling over some of the food? Like, is it a samosa or a chamuça? Major argument breaks out. The two giant raccoons, the dressed up raccoons, go head to head. In the kerfuffle, as they go at each other, there's a tearing sound. The headpieces are wrenched off. One is the sweating, dishevelled face of a teenager, the brother of someone who was actually invited. The other is the face of an alien. Because that's what aliens would do when they land, right? They'd just go straight to a party. They want to know where it's at. I'm afraid I'm not seeing, maybe you're seeing the story potential in this. If you want to write a bit of comedy with some mystery, a large dollop of strange. These have been some very challenging Exquisite Corpses today, but I think there is something in the hat shop detective story. There's something in there, and I'm going to find out what it is. Right, well, let's see where we can take this story idea based on the blood-curdling detective threatened the condescending sombrero or sombrero seller with a roll of the 12-sided dice. If you want to check all categories of interpretation, have a look at the show notes where I've listed them. Here goes. 3. That is a pub or cafe. Well, that's weird because we already have a setting in which the hat shop, which may or may not be built over a grave or a portal into the underworld where ghouls or perhaps something else is snaking through the floorboards in wisps to steal hats or just move things around. But maybe this category is encouraging me to think outside of that original setting and take the protagonist, this hat seller, outside of his comfort zone. Sometimes that's how you can get to know a character better. Put them somewhere else where they're less sure of themselves, especially if they're sure of themselves to begin with. You want to test that. What is that based on? Put them in a place where they're less in control of what's going on. That is a great way to test who they are and imagine how they react to awkward situations or to fear. So we get a taster of perhaps a later reaction they may have when things become more extreme, more out of their control and more frightening. A hat seller may be cocky and condescending in his own environment, in his shop or in his home, but things can change when he's somewhere that seems unpredictable or maybe distasteful to him. Let's go with that. He's a family guy and he's arranged to meet with this detective, who he doesn't yet know is blood-curdling. And for whatever reason, she's suggested or maybe insisted that they meet in what he would consider a dodgy pub. Sly, watchful eyes trail over him as he saunters in. He's not sure what to expect, what she'll look like. He hesitates by the bar, wanting to look around him, but also wanting to avoid the stares, as he clearly does not belong in here in his smart jacket and crisply ironed jeans. He's a hat seller. He cares about his clothes. But from over there, in that corner booth, a slim figure in a broad-brimmed hat nods with a half smile. But is it the detective? What should he do? How will he know? Why does he feel so nervous all of a sudden? He should have insisted she met him in the shop. She'll need to come and have a look around there anyway, won't she? So why meet here first? His dark eyes flit around the walls, taking in the decor. Strange-looking paintings hang on the walls, figures rendered in swirls of grey and blue like smoke. Glass-fronted display boxes jut here and there from the walls. One houses a spread of old tarot cards, soft at the edges. Another one contains a bird's skull. He resigns himself onto a bar stool, which creaks under his weight. "What can I get you?" asks the barman. Let's try another roll of the dice and see what this suggests. 9. A hidden identity or disguise. But we already know that the detective is difficult to discern among the clientele in this dingy pub. Her identity is hidden from us initially. But let's say it does turn out to be the one in the broad-brimmed hat. They exchange pleasantries, which don't seem so pleasant after all, not when our hat seller feels like everyone's listening in and staring at him. But then the woman looks up at the barman and lifts a casual hand. Moments later, music fills the room and as if on cue, the sound of low voices starts up around them. It's as if everyone, including our hat seller, has been given permission to start talking. So, she begins, what do you think is going on? I'm sure I don't know, he says, and it's a relief to see something, anything, normalising somehow, although the subject strikes him as being as abnormal as the circumstances of their meeting. I guess that's why I called. My daughter thinks something odd is going on. And you? I don't believe in such things. She leans forward, her elbows on the table, and regards him with deep brown eyes. And yet, here we are. A hidden identity or disguise. So, she is going to turn out to be more than what she seems. Is she a vampire hunter? Or on the lookout for any hints of strange activity going on? That's why she's put out the adverts in the paper. All that stuff about criminology is made up. But by the time her clientele realise, it hardly matters. Occasionally, it may be too late. She's noticed there's been a lot of suspicious deaths lately, murders reported on the news. Some have been covered up or their gory details suppressed to avoid widespread panic. But she has her ways of finding out about these things. But this case is rather different. She's unsure what's going on. It's very unusual for a vampire to tease humans in this way, behaving more like a poltergeist, and a moderate poltergeist at that, in simply moving stuff around, taking things, raising suspicions and fears, but nothing specific. What could it mean? Unless, of course, there are some older vampires among them who are just bored. They're the ones who tend to play with their food, so to speak. Maybe this is their way of sending her a message. You're making this too easy for us. They're coaxing her out, drawing her into a space which, for reasons she can't yet decipher, will make her vulnerable to attack. Vampires like that, experienced, playing games, toying with their enemy with such confidence, must be dangerous indeed. Things could get messy. She will have to tread carefully. Maybe bring in backup help. Something she rarely does, as vampire hunters tend to work alone, not wanting to complicate matters with relationships and loyalties that might easily be broken if a fight turns nasty. And annoyingly, this hat seller is full of doubt and suspicion, making it difficult for her to do her job. And this may be why, in the end, the blood-curdling detective threatened the condescending sombrero or sombrero seller. Interesting. That's really got me in the mood for urban fantasy. Although, to be fair, this is probably because my were-creature story was also urban fantasy, so I've been dwelling in that space for a little while recently. Speaking of which, the publishing opportunities I shared in the last show were both for longer stories with deadlines coming up within a couple of months. This time I want to share 2 call-outs for flash fiction if you are looking to get your finishing fix at higher speeds with fewer words. And I know so many of my listeners have a great talent for the Flash. Flash Frog is an online flash fiction magazine established in 2021, featuring stories under 1,000 words. They say, "We like our stories like we like our dart frogs, small, brightly coloured and deadly to the touch." They are open to submissions all year round. Check out their guidelines and their published fiction at flash-frog.com. Brilliant Flash Fiction is an online quarterly literary journal established in 2014. They too are open to submissions all year round for stories up to 1,000 words. They have quite a broad catchment as they are open to all genres. Find them at brilliantflashfiction.com. As a reminder, I don't know anything about these publishers other than the information I've just read out about their submission call-out. Whoever you choose to submit to, always run a check on Google to see what other people have said about them online, and always read the terms and conditions of publishing to be sure that these will suit you. And don't forget, I will be launching my new page, Brainstorming Emporium, quite soon. Ideally, I would like to kick this off with 3 authors featured on it, for starters, who've published a story or poem that's been inspired by a prompt on this show. That could be you. So I encourage you to write your stories, polish them until they shine, and see if you can get them published in a literary magazine, anthology, or website so they can be discovered by other readers. Then tell me all about it, and I will link it on Brainstorming Emporium. In the meantime, if you have a flash fiction story or poem up to 250 words long, based on any of the prompts in this show, you know what to do. Go to anatizard.com/submit. If you'd like your piece to be read out in the next show, please get in touch by the Friday after the release of this one. If you write in later, I will just include it in a later show. I'd particularly love to hear what you would make of the blood-curdling detective. But feel free to pick any prompt from the show that sparks your imagination. Until next time, go forth and be inspired. I hope you enjoyed today's Brainstorming. You can find out more about Exquisite Corpse and my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, at tizard.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter and you'll get Volume 1 for free. And while you're there, why not submit a few words to the Socks of Destiny on my play page? You may inspire me or inspire yourself to write a unique new story. See you next time.